Munke presents a deep dive of elusive drugs. Today's drug is called Bromo-DragonFLY, a synthetic psychedelic. Now you're probably thinking, a drug called Dragonfly can't be that bad, right? It's pretty fucking bad, okay? Like total organ failure bad, but we'll talk about that later. So, let's talk about the big fat elephant in the room. And I'm not talking about Luke. Why the hell is it called Bromo-DragonFLY? Well, take a look at the chemical structure. Don't you see it? It looks like a little dragonfly guy. Well, now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the meat and taters of this drug. It was first synthesized in 1998. The reason why it was created was to study the serotonin 5 HT2A receptor in the brain. Now, this is the receptor that influences mood, perception, and cognition, and of course the primary target for psychedelics. It's said that this drug is slightly less potent than LSD, but, and this is like a really big but, it has amphetamine-like stimulant properties. So let's personify LSD for a minute. And then let's give LSD tren. Now that's fucking scary. Bromo-DragonFLY is the longest lasting psychedelic, lasting around 2 to 3 days. Effects can be very delayed. It could take around 6 hours before you start feeling the effects of the dragonfly. Since we are on the topic of effects, let's talk about what some of them actually are. As you may have guessed, the dragonfly has the ability to produce very vivid hallucinations and alter perception and thought. Now, the physical effects. Of course, there are the usual effects like rapid heart rate, dilated pupils, and seizures. But then, there's vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction is when your blood vessels, like your arteries, start to narrow, meaning blood flow is restricted. This can cause tissue necrosis and organ failure. Like, imagine you're just sitting there tripping balls, and you see these little gnomes running across your feet, and then bam, your heart just explodes. Yeah, what makes it even worse is that there's a very small window between recreational doses and a dangerous one. The usual typical dose falls between 200 to 1000 micrograms. To put that into perspective, a 700 microgram dose of Bromo-DragonFLY is about the size of a single grain of table salt. So it would be pretty easy to fuck it up and take a dose that's going to take you on a trip to death, I guess. That doesn't really make much sense, but you get the idea. Now, another fun fact about the dragonfly is it can induce hallucinogenic persisting perception disorder, which means people will continue to experience visual or sensory disturbances well after taking Bromo-DragonFLY. Now, let's get into some trip reports. Did I trip on Bromo-DragonFLY? Trip report. On Saturday, my cousin and I decided that it would be awesome if we tripped on acid for the first time together. So we contacted a few people and eventually got in contact with a guy named Lucky. My cousin was familiar with this guy and I wasn't. He told us he had 3 tabs of some awesome acid and he would let us trip for free. At around 1 p.m., we left the house and started to drive to Lucky's house. We arrived at this dude's house, which was on the ghetto of all ghettos. Every other house was run down and crackheads littered the streets. Once we got to Lucky's house, we walked in, and before we could even sit down, was immediately handed some tinfoil with 3 tabs. He took one out, and we dropped the other 2 immediately. We sat around and watched him and his roommate play Fallout 3 for 1.5 hours. We are not tripping, nor did we feel anything at this point, so we came to the conclusion it was bad acid. We decided it would be best to get out of this dude's house. He was playing death metal, pulling out a coke mirror, and playing with swords. Worst environment for me to trip in, and go to McDonald's to get some food. As soon as we sat down in the car and buckled our seatbelts, it hit us like, bam, motherfucker, I'm here. Deal with me. We weren't seeing visuals, but we're tweaking the fuck out. My body got tensed, and it felt like my limbs were going to shoot off my body. So we started to drive and arrived at McDonald's. There we ordered food and continued to laugh and tweak while we ate. We eventually left because we were being stared down by this old dude a couple tables away. I wanted to go somewhere out in the open to enjoy my experience, so we drove until we found a nature preserve on the beach. We walked onto a wooden bridge that stretched 2 miles over open water, and that's when the visuals started full force. We laid down in the middle of the bridge and stared at the clouds. The visuals were unreal. The clouds swirled around and turned into one of those Chinese dragon festival floats. Came down from the sky, and as I inhaled, went into my chest. At this point, my cousin and I were both crying from the beauty of the experience. We continued to trip on the bridge for 4 hours while others were walking by us. At around 7 p.m., we had to leave because the park was closing. So we drove back to my cousin's house. At the house, we stayed outside under a cabana by the pool while it was pouring rain and continued to trip. The visuals got even more intense. The grass looked like tentacles that started growing up my legs. I was still tweaking and tripping balls. We eventually decided to go inside and get some food. We opened the fridge, and once again I peaked beyond belief. The cold air from the fridge and the flickering light in the fridge rocked my core. I couldn't control myself and had to walk away to the bathroom to empty my bowels before another visual did it for me. After this, about 10 hours after the trip, I was ready to come down. I began to get scared because I was told trips only last around 8 hours, and after 10 or 11 hours, the trip was just getting more intense. The gift that keeps on giving. At this point, I was so fried and tired that I wanted to sleep, so I tried and kept tripping myself awake. We stayed up all night trying to snap out of this trip. Day 2 rolled around, and we were still tripping. This is when a good time turned to torture. I was exhausted mentally and physically, that I couldn't hardly move, so we sat on the couch and watched an entire season of Breaking Amish and The Avengers. Still no sleep or food. It was now day 3, and I still have visuals. They were severely less intense, almost non-existent, so I'm happy to be coming down. The entire experience was a roller coaster through heaven and hell. Mostly hell. Anyway, I'm aware enough to answer. By the way, we are not certain it was DOC or Bromo-DragonFLY, but after a lot of research, those two seem to be the most plausible. Please give me your suggestions. Thankful that I'm alive. Given the fact that I am still alive today, I feel it my responsibility to report on the hell that has been the past few days. It is my hope that my first-hand experience with this malevolent substance can add to the canon of evidence regarding these incidents, and hopefully help our community determine what went wrong. Everything I am writing is based upon my best recollection, which is severely altered, so please bear with me. As hopefully you all know by now, something terribly, horribly toxic was packaged by Hopped RC, sold as 2CB Fly, and distributed to an unknown quantity of purchasers around the world in the last 2 weeks. I unfortunately was one of those people who received a nice little letter from Denmark containing the fake 2CB Fly. Let's call it Chemex. This Chemex is the Bromo-DragonFLY. So at 2 p.m., in a moment of heightened ignorance, I wiped all the Chemex residue onto my finger, enough to turn the tip of my index finger white, and licked it. That is to say, I wiped the material into the inside of my mouth, opposite the lower lip. Additionally, I picked up a small clump of Chemex that had fallen on the table, and put it under my tongue. Though I really have no accurate manner of judging it, I believe I may have ingested anywhere from 1 to 5 milligrams of the substance. That is my best estimate, though it may have been more. I really have no idea. At 1:15, my friend came over to my house. I told him I had lipped some of this material and was feeling a bit weird. Not tripping, but feeling like I had a bunch of weird drugs working their way through my system. He noted that I looked a bit fucked up when he arrived. At 1:45, we smoked a king-size spliff. I noticed smoking the joint got me much higher than normal, and I'm a daily marijuana user. At 2, we finished smoking and went to the store to get some food, water, and snacks. When I was in the grocery store, I had no idea what I should be getting, even though it was Saturday and I needed to buy my food for that day and the following. Stores are closed Sunday here. I ended up with an odd assortment of soft beverages and random snack foods. We walked back to my house, and on the way I noticed it felt very off to be walking. There was a feeling in my feet that made every step feel unnatural. Once we made it back to my house at approximately 2:30, the intensity was still approximately the same as it had been since we smoked. I couldn't say I was tripping, but I felt like there was some really weird drugs pulsing through my system. I prepared a pizza from a fresh crust, with olive oil, tomato, cheese, bacon, and goat cheese. I put it in the oven, and my friend and I began watching a TV episode in the living room while it was baking. I began noting my first hints of visuals, looking at the walls of the living room and the abstract paintings that were hung there. By 3 o'clock, I could barely cut the pizza, let alone eat it. The medallions of goat cheese appeared to be morphing white cesspools on a bed of brown flesh and bubbling blood. Somehow, I got myself to eat 2 or 3 pieces. It tasted good, though. After I had done so, my stomach began aching quite a bit. At approximately 3:15, my friend went home, and from here is when things get blurry. From this point, it's very difficult for me to describe or categorize the way I was feeling, but I'll do my best. I said okay and goodbye, but barely noticed when he left. We were supposed to meet with some friends at a bar at 11 that night. That didn't happen. I put the Beatles' Rubber Soul on my iTunes and laid down on the sofa. All I wanted to do was not move and keep my eyes closed. The music sounded pretty good, and soon incredible psychedelic senses were unfolding beneath my eyelids. Such intense CEVs I've never experienced before. During this time, my mom called me from my home country. I didn't answer because I was too fucked up. That could have been my last chance to talk to her. Thank God it wasn't. Kids, always answer your mom's phone calls. I continued feeling more and more lethargic and was in a state of somewhere between sleep and consciousness when at about 3:45, my roommate came into the living room and roused me. He began talking to me in Spanish, and I could barely comprehend what he was saying, let alone start speaking to him. I told him as best as I could that last night was rough, that I wasn't feeling well, and I needed to rest. I must have looked crazy and horrible fucked up. I went into my room and laid down on my bed. The music was still playing, but it sounded really loud. I couldn't even bring myself to reach over and turn it down. For the next hour, I was in a nearly catatonic state, unable and not wanting to move. Eyes closed to the whole time. I couldn't keep them open. However, during this time, effects kept getting worse, not in a linear manner, but rather in what seemed an exponential manner. It was 23 degrees Celsius, yet I was freezing. I was under all the covers in my bed, yet I began sweating immensely. I couldn't tell if I was awake or sleeping, conscious or unconscious. It seemed I was somewhere in between the two. This scared me a bit. At approximately 5 o'clock, I began getting really worried, so I forced myself to sit up, deciding to take a hot shower to see if that would help. Didn't. I was still extremely flushed, cold, and perspiring what seemed like gallons of sweat. Mentally, I was a bit delirious, not in a psychedelic conscious shifting way, but in an uncontrollable, disoriented sort of way. Then, at approximately 5:15, I logged online and searched Google. I came up upon Erowid, and my heart dropped when I saw the photo of the same exact bag that was sitting on my desk. I became angry, agitated, and threw the bag and threw some stuff off my desk. A violent reaction like this is not in my character at all. Then, at 5:24, I posted the following on Blue Light. I may have accidentally ingested some of this about 5.5 hours ago. Help, what do I do? Thankfully, the board instantly made me realize the gravity of this situation, especially Delcy M. Fan, who stated there was about a 6-hour delay before things got really bad. He was 100% right. I threw on clothes and shoes as quickly as I could in my condition, put the bag of Chemex in my pocket, and began walking as fast as I could to the nearest subway station, about 700 meters. During this walk, I began feeling amazing pulses of energy coming through my brain, but not in a good way. It felt like there was a fireworks show going off in my head. These weird surges would continue randomly until the following day. They were very disturbing and concerned me that some major neurological damage may have been done. I must have looked like a lunatic, and I sure felt like one. I was completely out of it, walking through the intersections with complete disregard for cross traffic. The weird feeling in my feet, as I mentioned earlier, had intensified significantly. I found myself questioning if I could make it to the hospital on my own. I was debating between calling an ambulance and taking the subway, but I finally reached the stop just as the train was arriving. In the metro, I don't remember anything, just dropping buckets of sweat everywhere. Effects were still getting stronger, and I was unsure if I'd be able to walk under my own power into the hospital. Finally, 3 stops later, I arrived to the hospital, and after nearly being hit by a bus crossing the street, ran into the ER waiting room. I cut everyone in line, ran to the check-in desk, and began spitting out my story in Spanish as best as I could. The check-in nurse pointed to the staircase and said to go down there ASAP. I took myself into the carriage area and explained again the story. The attending nurses were freaked out over the whole thing. I wrote down on a piece of paper the name of Hampt, his website, Irowid, and the name of the supposed chem, and blue light. I told them I had eaten contaminated 2CB fly and gave them the baggie. I was admitted at 5:54. They put me in a wheelchair and rushed me to the ER. I could barely stand as I had to take off all my clothes. They were so wet, it felt like I had gone swimming in them. They put me in a gown and went to work. They connected 14 or more EKG probes all over my body and kept me hooked up to that monitor. They also brought some special type of cardiac monitoring machine, no idea the name, and hooked me up to it. They drew blood for analysis. At about 6:30 gave me 2 diazepam, I think 10 milligrams each. The doctor told me all he could do was give me the diazepam, keep the monitors attached, and stand by in case they needed to intervene. The rest was on my body to fight through. I have to say, there was a good period there when I didn't feel like I was going to make it. Finally, the diazepam began to ease my extreme tachycardia and lower the blood pressure. However, there was some worry as my diastolic BP began dropping below 60, as my systolic stayed high. Don't know what it means, but the docs were a bit worried. Thank God it passed. Now, diazepam is known for killing trips, but it merely dulled this one. The visuals and deliria persisted through the dosage of Valium, though it did sedate me a bit. I must say though, I truly believe the diazepam, given to me when it was, helped prevent me from suffering major cardiovascular issues, as I had troubling levels of tachycardia and blood pressure. Exact numbers, I don't know. In fact, I believe it may be a major reason why I'm still here today to write this report. Now, for the next few hours, I don't remember much. Just the screams and unpleasant noises from the ER seemed to amplify in volume and magnify in the way they disturbed me. The open-eyed visuals continued distorting objects for hours. I thought a lot about how this would be such a horrible way to go, especially for my family and friends. What would it do to them for me to leave them like that, over something so stupid, preventable, and especially without telling them goodbye and that I loved them? I was determined to walk out of that hospital. I'm not a religious man, but by God, I prayed my ass off that night. Finally, at approximately 2:30, the doctor told me that he was discharging me. I told him I didn't think I was ready to go, but he told me that if I made it this far, I would be okay. Unsure, thinking of how Hop died so far in this trip after sleeping, I reluctantly agreed and began to get ready to go home. I still felt awful, like I should be dead. I still could barely walk, and I was still mentally out of it. Somehow though, I made it home and posted an update on blue light. The hallucinations had mostly gone, but the psychological and physical effects maintained their toxic presence in my system. My posting from 3:35 accurately reflects how I was feeling. I don't know if high is the right way to put it. Not right would be more accurate. Like, I'm not tripping, but I definitely still feel like I have poison inside of me. I didn't want to leave the hospital, but they made me. At this point, I still felt unsure I was going to be okay. I was still afraid to sleep because of what I read about Hop's passing. But finally at 4 o'clock, I turned off the laptop and tried to get some sleep. I got a horrible night's sleep, maybe 4.5 or 5 hours of interrupted slumber. Probably never got more than 30 minutes consecutive of sleep. Finally, at about 9 o'clock, I woke up and laid in bed, feeling like I should be dead. Both my head and body felt absolutely awful, like I had been poisoned, and that poison was still inside of me. At about 9:30, still laying in bed and not feeling any better, I was at a loss for what to do. A little while later, I called my friend Vita Verde, and she told me to come over to her place right away. Since then, I've been under her watchful eye, and she has been the most amazing, wonderful friend. The rest of the day, I spent feeling not right. I don't know how to explain it. It really is impossible to describe. I don't feel like myself. I could still feel the Chemex marinating in my system, doing bad things. I didn't move from her couch nearly the whole day, and the time just passed by without me noticing. I felt horrible, physically, like I shouldn't be here. I took another 1 milligram clonazepam. What the fuck is this? Clonazepam, and proceeded to fall asleep on Vita Verde's sofa. I was out within 3 minutes and didn't wake up for almost 11 hours. When I woke up, I felt refreshed physically, but my brain still felt odd. I have no appetite. Vita Verde's been giving me little bits of food. I've been eating it, but I have no physical nor mental urge to do so. I have been drinking a saline and electrolyte solution that has been helping me a lot to replenish the salts and minerals I lost through the flushing and sweating. I still don't feel normal. I hope I do soon. Right now I am thankful that I am alive and able to be here writing this report. Thanks to everyone at Blue Light for their advice, concern, and support. I am thankful for the hospital employees for trying to help me, and I'm especially thankful for Vita Verde's companionship and support through this ordeal. The recovery would have been immeasurably worse if I had to suffer through it alone. Thanks to everyone, and I hope that this report may contribute in some way to understanding what exactly was in that batch of 2CB fly. So yeah, this one's crazy because this guy said he took 1 to 5 milligrams of the substance. And like I said earlier, the typical dose of Bromo-DragonFLY is around 200 to 1,000 micrograms. So, yeah, this guy is very lucky to be alive, and I'm glad he made it through. Well, that's it for today. What's crazy about these two stories is both of these people didn't even realize what they were actually taking. Only later, after they took the drugs, did they come to the realization that they took a very dangerous substance. I hope you found this stuff as interesting as I did. Well, don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a good one. Peace out.